Alex, thanks again for taking time to chat. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm Alex, the CEO and co-founder at Respeecher, and we built world-class voice cloning products here.
Excellent. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit about Respeecher and what a lot of your company focuses on.
Yeah, when we just started, and it was in 2018 as a company, and a few more years before that as just a group of people who were excited about the technology, we understood that in order to get high quality content, adapt technologies like voice cloning, we would need to push those technologies to the extent where sound quality, speaker identity would be on that level where it can go through pickiest sound engineers in Hollywood studios. So in the beginning, we were optimizing towards sound quality, trading off a lot of usability. Requirements to datasets were huge, time to deliver was huge, but our goal was to make it sound in the way like it was just recorded by a human in front of a microphone yesterday. And once we hit those bars of quality of the synthetic speech, we started to work on the technology itself, introducing different features to the technology to cover wider emotional range, be able to control pitch, be able to use less data to train, be able to use it in self-serve mode and other things. But our core has always been being obsessed with audio quality, and sometimes we are even pickier than our clients.
I like that. You take pride in what you do. I was curious too, artificial intelligence is obviously growing at such a rapid rate. When did the technology for synthetic speech really become quite capable at the quality that you wanted? And I'm also curious, like, what was holding this technology back prior to now?
Yeah, I mean, the technology of synthetic speech has been around for quite a while. That would be a couple of decades, right? But the thing is, it's always hard to build something in speech area using artificial intelligence because it's really hard to judge the result. You always rely on subjective measurements. It's really hard to say whether it's natural enough, right? Unless you just listen to it. So you can make 100 of people or 1,000 of people listen to it, but it's still a subjective judgment. And ears are different, and people like myself, they don't hear many artifacts our sound engineers can hear in sound, and optimizing towards getting rid of those annoying synthetic speech artifacts, metallic noises, it's somewhere on the edge between pure IT AI development and some sound craftsmanship.
I love that. And yeah, I remember it was like 30 years ago, like the Sound Blaster cards, if you ever remember that audio back then, like SB Talker would allow you to do text to speech, which back then was obviously very robotic, but it's, as machine learning is obviously, obviously that's different to machine learning, but machine learning part of that is doing synthetic speech and things like that. And in terms of the usage of it, like what are some of the different ways that you guys have managed to leverage synthetic speech for different mediums, that obviously entertainment, and what are some of the other ones?
Yeah, I mean, the way how Respeecher does synthetic speech is not the most popular way in the market. So most of the companies in synthetic speech field are doing text-to-speech, which is, in our opinion, is quite limited in terms of emotional range, in terms of ability to control emotions, in terms of language models, they're using vocabularies and stuff. Therefore, the route we chose was to focus on something AI does in a good way, like replicating a particular voice, but not letting AI do performance. Well, text-to-speech has to let AI guess how it would sound if human would say it, so it would resemble to a human voiceover in this piece. We take from humans what they do best, and humans are great in performing or being guided how to perform, and we apply technology on top of their performance to make the voice sound as they desire. In terms of applications, initially we were focused on high quality content production, mostly because technology was heavy and it could have been affordable only for big projects and big studios. And there we basically we detach a human from their voice, and that means that in a movie like The Mandalorian, when you need to get Luke Skywalker appear exactly like he looked 40 years ago, and he should sound exactly like he sounded back then. That's a thing that should be solved with the technology like ours, because there are obviously no other authentic ways to get this voice exactly like it sounded back then. So we were focused on those edge projects like de-age and resurrection projects, but now we see that it's finally getting adopted in the market. And this understanding that human is not specifically tied to their vocal apparatus they have in a particular moment of their life, and it's changing all the time. It brings a lot of flexibility and scalability in the voiceover world in general. So many humans can speak in one voice, or one human can speak in many voices. So there would be a better allocation of load on voice actors, and the way how the content is being voiceovered will be optimized, and it's already being optimized. But aside of that, we apply our technology for cases when a real-time voice transformation needs to happen, and that's new experiences. We can imagine a theme park where we can communicate with a character from our favorite movie, and someone would drive this character from behind the wall, but we would hear the voice that would be authentic to this character, as well as there are a lot of ways how to do visuals even in real time. But it's not just content production. There are several other industries that can significantly benefit from the technology. One of them is healthcare, where people with distorted speech who can speak, but the way how they speak is not good, so it's really hard to understand them. It's hard for them to speak loudly enough. They already experienced our technology in some of early projects, and it seems we can help to many thousands of people even early next year, in the cases when they went through throat cancer and have electrolarynx or TEP. They can just convert the current voice into a better voice, or even in the voice they had before. We also explore applications where in real time a call center can speak to you in the voice of your favorite athlete, for example, or just in the voice you like.
That would be kind of interesting. Maybe it would prevent people from hanging up so quick when a call center is calling up and it's Morgan Freeman on the other end of the phone. Yeah, I think it's really fascinating. I definitely want to lean into the health aspect. I had a lot of questions around that too, which because I think that with most innovation, it's usually in whatever the consumer wants first. So entertainment usually has what gets adopted first, but there's so many different applications for what you guys are developing, especially as you mentioned, like real-time translation. I've found that really fascinating speaking at events in China or Korea or Finland and other places where sometimes you'll be speaking and you got to wait and have it translated. In Korea, I've experienced like real-time translation, which was pretty fascinating, but to actually have it where you could have an earpiece, I imagine that's like one use for it, where you could have an earpiece and what the speaker is saying, being able to actually hear them in their own voice, being able to say that into your ear would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's an amazing use case, and we actually are in process of doing something like this. So Respeecher does not do translation itself when we talk about language translation, right? So we do not deal with language. But when a motivational speaker goes on the stage and they're American and they're somewhere in China, there is a person who basically repeats what they're saying, translating it in Mandarin. And this person in the output could sound in the exact voice of this motivational speaker, keeping all the speaker identity untouched. So it would basically sound very natural. And speaker identity for high demand folks is something very important. It's a big part of their IP.
I was talking with Chris Yumi. He does a lot of deepfakes, like Tom Cruise deepfakes, which have become quite popular. And he's been working a lot with like Netflix, companies like that, to translate where the facial gestures, everything are correct to the language that they're speaking. Do you think that that's one of those things you can marry different technologies to have a movie where you decide it's in, let's say, Korean, and I want to watch it and enjoy it in English or some other language, being able to not only have the facial performance done by deep fake technology, but then also the voice stay true, but being spoken in a different dialect?
Yeah, I mean, Chris and Metaphysic are good friends, and we delivered a few projects together. So recently you might have heard our work in their finale of America Got Talent, when they wanted to make Elvis to speak exactly like he sounded in his interviews back then. To your point, some time ago, maybe half a year ago, we did a piece with Ella Black, with Metaphysics, where we enabled Ella Black, the singer, to do a tribute to his close friend Avicii, who passed away some time ago, and sing his song Wake Me Up in different languages. And they were in charge of making visuals, making lip sync happen, and we were in charge of taking recordings of other performers who were singing in Chinese, in Italian, in French, in Spanish, and convert that in Ella Black. And when you marry these two technologies, like Respeecher and Metaphysic, who are benchmark technologies in terms of synthetic media, you get very impressive result. So when we saw the whole piece combined and Ella was singing in different languages and then shifted to English, and that was original track he recorded, it was so smooth. You wouldn't notice anything visually and in sound, and that's really encouraging moments, because it's really hard to go through uncanny valley in visual media.
Yeah, I remember him talking about that actually, which sounded amazing. And again, that's why I find this technology so exciting, is all the possibilities, because some things can be exciting, but there is so many applications to both help people as well as, in other cases, be able to hold some history of different talent that's passed. You mentioned Mandalorian before. Do you want to talk a little bit about the uses of it on Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi and other shows like that?
The job for replicating the voice of young Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill's voice, exactly how it sounded 30 to 40 years ago in the very first movies. And that's been challenging projects, because you can imagine data that was recorded a while ago, and our goal was to make it sound like it was recorded yesterday. And technology is really dependent on data. So those projects, they usually require a lot of time, a lot of efforts. And luckily, Skywalker sound team is amazing. They're so dedicated to perfection. They spend so much time. They record thousands of takes, like literally thousands of takes. So the output is really good. But we also noticed that we were able to improve the quality of sound of Luke Skywalker from Mandalorian to Boba Fett. So in Boba Fett, we really like how it sounds. In Mandalorian, we might have had some tiny questions regarding our output. But also they do amazing post-production, and it's unique experience for us, because first we can learn from best. We can learn from folks who were in charge of audio innovation in Hollywood for several decades. But also, it's really encouraging for us to see our work in such major movies. And also, it's really cool to see reactions. So once Mandalorian was aired, we were not able to speak about that according to our contracts. We were accredited there, though, and we saw fans' reactions, and it was so unusual to see a grown man crying, because with Luke's appearance, they were brought to their childhood, to their youth ages, and some parts of their life, of their bright moments from their past was brought back to them. It's really meaningful. In Obi-Wan, we were working on James Earl Jones' voice. It was a very cool and very hard project. It was specifically hard for us because at the time it was an active phase of this project delivery. We we had this Russian invasion, full-blown invasion started in Ukraine. Though luckily we managed to go through all the challenges that it introduced to the company and still be able to deliver. And yeah, we'll have many interesting stories to tell once it's over and Ukraine wins. It was very good to see the result in Obi-Wan. It was really high quality content. It was very educational for us to see how the team respectfully treated the data, the character, the way how a character should perform. This is something that should be introduced to the industry in the very beginning of the technology like ours adoption, and we are lucky that we have such partners introducing such big projects in the best possible way. It was a big piece, and also it was very cool that we got some significant press from Mandalorian, from Obi-Wan, and in each headline we had Ukraine, so it was not just Respeecher recreated the voice, it was company from Ukraine, and it's really important for us to keep Ukraine high on global agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything that you guys are going through right now, it's got to be really tough. And if that means that you guys are putting, in your way, attention back on Ukraine, again, like it's great that you're able to help with that. Because, yeah, I think that it's easy for all of us who are safe and away from all the terrible things happening at the moment to forget that sometimes. So yeah, it's so important. And do you want to talk a little bit about the Speak Ukraine movement and what you guys have put together for that, and also who's participating in it?
In the few days after the full-blown invasion, in the end of February, once we figured out how we work, how we operate, all those things with some people relocation and stuff, we were thinking about how we can apply our technology to bring more attention to Ukraine, to support Ukrainians. And given that at that time we already had some really cool first samples from our system in cross-lingual mode, that means that we can enable, say, Tom Hanks speak any other language, having their voice timbre in. We thought it would be cool to launch a campaign when we let famous people to be able to say whatever they want to say to Ukrainians, some word of support in our language. And it has another layer of meaning where we know that our language, Ukrainian language, has been a target for Russian filthy attacks for many centuries. Actually, they tried to destroy our nation, not just by destroying it physically, that's not the first time they're doing that, but also destroying our culture. And our language is a huge part of our culture. It's quite meaningful for us to bring more attention to Ukrainian language. And therefore we launched this campaign. We called people from different fields, celebrities, to join it. We delivered a few pieces. One of the first was with Bielievtsov from The Orange is the New Black, and she recorded an amazing video. And also she wore this embroidered shirt we sent her some time ago when we were cooperating on one of the projects, and it really supported. I mean, it supported not just us, it supported the community here. It was received in a very warm way. Then we did Mother of Elon Musk, May Musk, and we are going to release 2 more pieces in a week or 2. I wouldn't say the names yet, but those are major celebrities.
That's amazing and inspiring as well. So I love that you're doing something like that, and also, of course, how well received it is. Yeah, I think it's amazing. I hope that more people get involved in it.
Yeah, and we are focusing not only on like Hollywood celebrities or actors. I mean, any famous person who is recognizable all over the world is welcome to join. If that's an astronaut or IT entrepreneur, we are just just committed to do that because we see how it's being received and how meaningful it.
That's excellent. I was curious too, what's the typical process for creating a training model of someone's voice? How much information, is it minutes or is it hours of content, or is it just the more information the better? Like how does it typically work?
Yeah, I mean, those data requirements, they are constantly changing, so we are improving our technology. And now we feel very comfortable if we have half an hour, like 30 minutes of voice recorded in good recording conditions, presenting as wide emotional range as possible, or at least the emotional range in the data set would correspond to what we expect to get in the output in conversions. But there have been plenty of projects where we had to deal with less data. So for Vince Lombardi, for example, in the Super Bowl 2021, we had just a couple of minutes of good, clean recordings. And that's not only the one project like this. So we can deal with way less data, and those data requirements, they go drastically down. So sometimes we can even experiment with seconds of data, though there would be trade-offs. Then it takes 2 weeks approximately to train the model. But we also have faster models, so we can train even in several days if that's really required. And then the model is set up and ready to do conversions, and any source speaker could be converted into a target voice.
It's amazing. I'm curious, just from the entertainment perspective, obviously there are a lot of people like James Earl Jones announced recently that he's retiring, and Bruce Willis also recently did the same for health reasons. Do you see that becoming more of a common thing, that talent might sell their likeness so that way other people can continue to use it for different movies or further shows and other things down the line?
Yeah, I think that right now we are in the very early stages of adoption of the technology, and high-profile IP owners, talents, they might have some concerns. We invest in navigating through by introducing huge projects that being done in a very respectful manner. And I do believe that in future we would have more and more people that would be able to keep their IP working in the way where it's detached from them. And it's not just about retiring, right? Though we want to hear James Earl Jones in the next movies. I mean, that's such an iconic voice, and if he cannot perform in that voice, it would still be so amazing for fans, for millions of people, to be able to hear this voice again if he likes it. Also for cases when we need to de-age someone, there are plenty of movies where an actor should play different roles or from different stages of their life, or just to need to look and sound younger, and those are quite cool creative possibilities for the technology. We also experiment with accents right now, and we have some good results on accent conversion, and that means that the way how accents are being done in the movies will be disrupted quite soon. So let's think about this movie, The Crown, right? They spend a lot of time, efforts, and money, obviously, for training actors who are Americans to speak in royal British accent. And it's hard to do. It's hard to adopt a new accent. Especially if you're not a native speaker of this language. Therefore, technology could help, could give a hand here. And instead of training people to be able to perform this particular accent, they can speak normally in their American accent, and technology would be in charge of applying this Royal British accent. And that's just in the English accents, but if we think about worldwide accents in all the directions, it's becoming huge.
I always joke I'm Australian, but I always have to try and speak American because no one understands me here otherwise, even though I speak English and they speak English. So I can only imagine how how many things get lost in translation when you venture outside of that. But yeah, I think it's so amazing where it's all heading. And obviously you guys care a lot around ethical AI, and I think that that's a big topic by itself. I was talking with Stable Diffusion or Stability AI last week, and one thing that they had mentioned is for a lot of what they're doing is creating invisible watermarks or being tagged in the data, so that way you can always tell that something was artificially created. Is that something that while you're developing this technology, you're also looking at ways to detect what is synthetic?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the equation, right? And the equation is way bigger than just watermarking content. So once we started Respeecher, we had to build a very strict ethics policy. And the core of this ethics policy was to ensure that our technology and our services are not misused. So we always required permission and consent from a voice owner in order to ensure that those people are fine with the technology to use their IP, their voice identity in a particular project. But that's just part of it. Another part is protecting our technology, like using watermark to be able to tell Respeecher generated content from any other content. And watermarking in audio is not a simple task. We have not introduced that yet. And the main challenge there that we would need to come up with a watermark that would fit in a very small chunk of audio. You can create like 3 seconds using Respeecher, just saying few words, and put a legit watermark in such small duration is really hard. Though the watermark technology for audio has been around for many years, like Sony introduced it to fight with piracy, right? So they were able to introduce a watermark, but in 20 minutes of content, and that's way easier. And watermark is always a balance between being heard, so you would just hear it as a listener, which is no good, but also being easily removed. So you can just think that watermark is putting something on very high or very low frequencies, and you wouldn't be able to hear it, but that means that in post-production you can just cut it off. So that's a complex project. We are still working on it. It's hard to predict when we would be able to introduce that. But aside of that, we also invest in what we call synthetic speech detection. So we want to come up with a detector of synthetic speech, not obligatory of Respeecher synthetic speech, but given that our benchmarks of synthetic audio quality are very high, it makes sense to start with our synthetic audio that's produced by Respeecher. But aside of that, technology is developing. Technology is being commoditized. There is obviously a future, like in a few years actually, bad actors, bad players would be able to have access to something that can produce a result like Respeecher produce today in terms of quality. And all those measures we are putting in place in order to protect our technology, they have limited effect on misuses on a global scale. And therefore, I think one of the most important things is actually introduce technology to wide audience, to general community, to global society, and just tell that this stuff exists. It doesn't go anywhere, and it will be used by bad players. But if we know how it works, if we know that there is a possibility to recreate a voice in a very convincing way, we will just need to treat information differently. And that's something, that's a route we went through many times, starting from printing press and finishing with Photoshop or visual effects. When we look at something, at a picture, say, of me flying over Eiffel Tower, we wouldn't think I'm flying there actually, because we know that Photoshop exists and it's capable of doing that. And in case if we are hearing that someone saying something weird and that's not trusted source of information, we should check this information. That's basic hygiene of consuming information, and that's something that's been achieved with showing technology to many people. That's why we always go to interviews, we always go to conferences, we invest in our participation in many groups of different players in the industry to introduce technology to them and build frameworks on how it should be adopted. But also the projects we are doing, it's quite a contribution, right? When we see this work that's been done for Obi-Wan, for Mando, for Book of Boba Fett, millions of people saw the result of the technology and they start thinking about what's our downsides of technology like this be applied for bad purposes. And that's exactly what we want to achieve. We want global community to think and be aware.
And that's a really good analogy too. Like Photoshop is something that, you know, for decades has been around and used, but now it's become a household term, and because of that, you start to question if something seems unexpected, then perhaps it is artificial. So building more awareness around what exists at least creates more awareness. So I think that's really smart.
Yeah, actually, when Photoshop appeared, everyone thought that it would be used for making porn images, and all the images on the internet would be manipulated using Photoshop. We see it's not true. And the reason why we thought that way, because we didn't know how exactly it works. Mm-hmm. And now it's just a common thing, and we know everything about Photoshop.
And you talked before about having synthetic speech detection being something that would play a big role. I'm kind of curious in terms of like adversarial networks. Do you ever think that, I mean, I'm sure that you guys are using GANs to do a lot of improvement on your voice technology, but I was kind of curious whether the better the speech detection, the better quality in return your work becomes, because obviously it helps improve the level of quality and convincibility that comes out of it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of detection itself, it's gonna be an armor race, right? There would appear good detectors, and then technology, synthetic speech technology, would develop in order to beat the good detector, and they would start moving in that way. So they're going to conquer each other, right? And that's a common thing with detectors, and in any way of technology protection, no matter it's voice or it's just physical access to somewhere. So it's gonna be a race, but at least detectors would help us to get like 99% of content marked, because most of the synthetic speech in the market is actually not good. So you can hear the artifacts if you listen. Often you can just hear it, and that's why it's so annoying to listen to an audiobook produced using some common text-to-speech technologies, because you just hear it. It's something we are quite sensitive to, and that means that technology would catch it up too, and even more precise. But even if we would be able to introduce a good detector to somewhere, to gatekeepers like Facebook, YouTube, and those folks would be able to just mark content. Look, this content might have used synthetic media technology. That would be good enough. That's quite a massive protection.
Absolutely. And you mentioned audiobooks. That was one question I was curious about, was what other mediums have you been able to leverage this technology in? I think it'd be really cool to be able to have like an audiobook which perhaps the author isn't around anymore, or just didn't do the reading themselves. Like being able to have it spoken in their voice would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, audiobooks is a very interesting space, and it urges for innovation there, because, I mean, it's hard to record audiobooks. We don't have much choice when we listen to audiobooks. We have just one or maybe few voices, and that's it. And the thing is, if we want to listen to high quality audiobook, we should rely on good performers, and therefore the technology like ours steps in. And it's long form content is new for Respeecher, so we just started doing long form this year. Before that it was hard because our technology used to make some accidental mistakes. It might have mispronounced some words, and that's fine if you work on a movie, right? You still have many takes and you can pick from good takes, but in long form content it would be quite significant load, a lot of work to go through it. But now the tech is robust enough and we start doing something like this. We released an audiobook with one of YouTubers recently with the whole like 9 hours audiobook that was narrated by one person and converted into another voice. But the future there is very exciting. So first of all, we would be able to hear the voices we really want to hear in audiobooks. So if I want to listen to an audiobook that was narrated by Tom Hanks or Scarlett Johansson, they couldn't narrate all the audiobooks I'd like to listen. They just don't have time for this. But if they give their permission, if they're fine with their voice to be applied for those audiobooks, we can just convert existing audiobooks into their voice, and that means that listener would have a choice. But additionally to that, you might want to listen to some voices we know where in cases when an athlete or an author themselves are not professionally trained to be a voice actor. And sometimes it could hurt to listen to an audiobook narrated by author because it could be boring. They never learned how to act in front of microphone. But this voice can be driven by professional actor, and we will hear the voice identity we are familiar with and we like, but the quality of content would be essentially better than someone like author themselves or athletes doing that in their own way. So that's really interesting future. But also audiobooks could become audio dramas right away. So it would be the same workflow process. One actor records an audiobook, but in places when he speaks for a character of a different gender or different age, this part could be just converted into a voice from our library, for instance, and that's amazing. Audio dramas are cool, and they're not that popular now because it's hard to produce.
Absolutely, and that's a good point. I was thinking that myself, that there are certain authors I really like, and I've preferred the audiobook from the professional narrator over the actual author because they're just not that good at being able to, you know, read and keep you captivated versus someone who does that for a living. So having that performance and that charisma with that author's voice, it would be a great kind of marriage of the two. Just going back to health, because I personally think that's like a really fascinating subject, just because as much as we love to be entertained, I love seeing all these different technologies and how they are really innovating and helping change the world. So I was kind of curious for you if you wanted to lean a little bit more into that in some of the different applications that you've been using Respeecher to help others and also kind of bridge the gap with some of the struggles. One thing I'll mention, like I recently had Bell's palsy, so like half of my face was paralyzed for 3 or 4 months. I'm still recovering, but I can speak now. But at least on the most minuscule level, that was something that I experienced, was not being able to talk, which doing a podcast and also working on set, that is something that was quite crippling for me. But obviously for people who experience this permanently, looking for solutions where they are able to communicate with other people, that'd be extremely life-changing.
We have a few directions. One of them is healthcare. We started to talk about. I mean, we were always excited about applying our technology for people that have distorted speech. They can't speak, but it's really hard to understand them, and they struggle a lot to speak. It's hard for them. But we never were able to apply it right away, just because our technology had a lot of limitations. It was very sensitive to recording conditions. It was not working in real time. Now we have real-time version of our technology. And early this year, someone in March, we got some significant updates to our system, and we tried to apply it to distorted speech right away. We tried electrolarynx speech, we tried TEP, and it worked out. So we heard some improvements, and we applied our technology in a very bold way, right out of the box, without any adjustments for these particular cases. And we heard this promising. We spoke to people who actually used our technology, tried it out. We were extremely encouraged by them and started to run some tests, some trials with real patients, trying to navigate how to deliver this piece of technology and what needs to be adjusted, where the bottlenecks, so it can improve their quality of lives. We started cooperating with 2 universities in the UK and in the US, and we just scratching the surface there. So we just trying some tiny things, and the contribution of technology like cars in healthcare space would be massive in future. So we expect many people would benefit from it to extent where it's life-changing, because you need to communicate, and when you cannot even talk to your relatives and you cannot keep the discussion going, it's just a different life, and that's not a life I'd like to have in any case. Another application I'd like to mention is in content production, but it really brings content production of documentaries and investigative journalism on the next level. And I'm talking about anonymization. We have projects like this. We are delivering a few right now, and the cases are when you are interviewing a victim of a crime, and they want to be anonymized. They want to reveal their identity. You used as a content maker to apply some common techniques, like put a contour light in so you wouldn't be able to see a face, but also you apply very heavy voice morphers on the voice itself. And those voice morphers, they're just bad. They don't sound good. They don't convey all their inflections, the way how they say those things. And those are quite meaningful pieces of content that should be kept. And we are very excited about applying technology for those cases, because documentary journalism, investigatory journalism is something very meaningful in this era. We should know about those things, and being in Ukraine and knowing what's happening here, and seeing people that went through very difficult times when Russia invaded, and their people, I don't know, it's hard to call them humans, did bad things with them. We should speak about that. We should bring it up. And Respeecher is committed to do projects for investigators on victims of a crime of the war Russia started in Ukraine pro bono. So we are doing those pieces for free. And that's would make content better. That would make it perceived better.
That's amazing. Yeah, I was going to say that in regards to investigative journalism, that would play a big role for having anonymity for a lot of people, especially over there, who do want to talk openly when censorship at the highest level is really a big factor. Again, this has been really amazing just to talk with you about all the different innovations, as well as ways that you're helping the world. So I'm really excited to see what comes down the line and where this all goes. But where can people go to find out more about Respeecher?
It's just respeecher.com. We have plenty of information there. You can also check our IMDb page to check the movies we were credited. And also in few weeks, a big video game will be released, so players would hear our work. And just recently some movies were released we will be able to talk about soon. So we try to keep this information up and running for pieces we can talk about.
That's so great. And thank you, Alex. I'll make sure to link to everything in the show notes as well. But this has been really great to talk, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for making this, and thank you for having me.